Hey guys, today we're in the book of Numbers, chapter 9. So God has been getting them ready by ordering the Israelites, the priests, the Levites, getting everything situated, and they're about to head out for the promised land. But we got one more thing that we must do. And chapter 9 is what that is about. And so we see in verse 2, let the people of Israel keep the Passover at its appointed time on the 14th day of this month. It has been exactly 1 year since they left Egypt. So the first Passover they did in Egypt, this is now the second Passover that they are doing on Mount Sinai right before they are to leave. So if you remembering, the book of Exodus took about 11 months for them to do and to build the temple. The book of Leviticus was about a month. And so here we start the beginning of the second year. And so they are to do Passover. They are to keep it. And so it says, so the people of Israel did. But here is a little interesting point. So they're going to keep Passover, but then it says that there were certain men. Now, probably not the only group of people that are kind of guilty of sin in their life, but there were a group of men that had sin in their life. They were unclean, and they come to ask Moses, hey, can you ask God, because we want to do Passover, right? But we know that Leviticus chapter 7, Leviticus chapter 22 says if people have sin in their life, if they're guilty of sin, they are to be cut off. They're to be pushed out. And so what should they do? How should they do it? Can they do Passover? Because Passover is not a sacrifice. It's not happening in the tabernacle. It's happening at their house, right? It's happening with them. And so what can be done? And I love this. Verse 8, Moses is a kind of a brief view of the humanity of Moses. And he says, and wait, I got to hear from God. Moses was for sure. I don't know what, should you do it? Should you not do it? And so he says, I don't know. Let me ask God. God will tell me what we should do about this. Moses wanted God's wisdom on this matter. And so the Lord spoke to Moses, and the Lord gave Moses an answer just like Moses knew that he would. It's a great reminder for us when we're unforsure of the moment. We should always ask God. God is a giver, and He will illuminate the path that we need to go. And so this is what God says, right? He says, if any of you or your descendants is unclean through touching a dead body or on a journey, right? So they're away from Israel, he shall still keep the Passover. So if you're unclean, you shall still keep the Passover. If you're on a journey, you're a sojourner, you're traveling, still keep the Passover. And when you first read this verse, you think, wow, like somebody in sin can that seems weird. Well, that's why the next verse is there. In the second month on the 14th day. God says you can keep the Passover, but you'll keep the Passover 1 month later. Right? Remember, they're to celebrate the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. Here Moses says, if you are unclean during the original Passover, the first month, 14th day, or you're sojourning, you can keep Passover, but you will do it on the second month. You have 30 days to get your life right, to become clean, to do what you need to be right before God, right? And it's just an amazing picture of God that doesn't just say, oh, you're not good enough, you're out. No, God says, no. You can still do it. You can still have a meal with me. You can still have relationship, fellowship in the New Testament, koinonia with me. But you still got to get it right. You still got to do it right. I'll give you 1 month to get it right, and then we will have that. It's amazing. We hear so many times in today's culture, if Jesus was alive, Jesus would accept this. Jesus would do that. Jesus would be loving. Jesus wouldn't be against abortion. Jesus wouldn't be a homosexuality. Jesus is love. Listen, Jesus is God. And God does want relationship. God does want fellowship, but do not get the message of God crossed. God is holy. He cannot be around anything that is unholy. And yes, He does want a relationship with you, but you must be holy first. The clean and the unclean cannot come together. The holy and the unholy cannot come together. And so God says, I do want relationship with you, and you can have this fellowship meal with me, this Passover meal, but you've got 1 month to get your life right. God's not turning a blind eye to sin. God is not turning a blind eye to people not living in God's rules in His fellowship. He says you have 1 month to get it right. And if you don't, you're out. You're out. You're to be kicked out. And you keep reading through this. Here's the 14th day there shall be. Verse 12, they shall leave none of it until the morning. So even though they're doing it on the second month, they have to do Passover exactly the same way that they were doing it on the first month. There's nothing crossed. It's the exact same Passover meal. Notice this, a little brief kind of moment of Jesus. Nor break any of its bones. We see this verse in Exodus chapter 12, verse 46, but we also see it in the New Testament in John chapter 19, verses 31 through 36, showing us that Jesus, when He was sacrificed, no bone was broken because He was the perfect Passover lamb. He's the reason that death passes over. So this is what we call a messianic prophecy. We saw it in Exodus 12. We see it here again in Numbers chapter 9. Not break any of its bone, verse 13. But if anyone who is clean and is not on a journey fails to keep Passover, he shall be cut off. If you do not do Passover and there's no reason that you don't except for you don't want to do it, you're out. You're out of Israel. You're cut off. That's how important the Passover is to God. Notice this, verse 14, and if a stranger sojourns amongst you and would keep the Passover to the Lord according to the statute of the Passover and according to its rule, so shall he do. Notice this. This is amazing. This is amazing for me and you. Passover was not only for the Jews. If a sojourner, if a traveler, God didn't care about their heritage. He didn't care about their ethnic tribe. He didn't care about their bloodline. He cared about those who were in sin amongst and wanted to be around God. If they wanted to be with God, then yes, they could partake in the Passover meal. And you shall have one statute, both for the sojourner and the native. The sojourner, the non-Jew, has to do the Passover meal the same as the Jew, as the Hebrew. And so it's just an amazing thought as we move forward. And you guys know I've always struggled, like, should we do it? Should we not do it? And so maybe you're having those thoughts. And so we can talk more about that later. And so they celebrate the Passover, and then it comes into talking about the cloud, right? God is over the tabernacle. On the day that the tabernacle was set up, all the way back in Exodus chapter 40, the cloud covered the tabernacle. When we say cloud, it's what we call the Shekinah glory cloud of God. It's a cloud, a semblance of God is over the tent. We see that during the day, it was like a cloud providing shade, and at night it has the appearance of fire. Notice it didn't say it was fire, it had the appearance of fire. So it provided light and protection, maybe warmth during the night as they're in the middle of the desert. And so God always provided, both in the day, both in the night, but every single person could see God. They could see that God was in the camp. And it says that whenever the cloud lifted from the tent, after that, the people of Israel set out. Remember, to this point, God has never left the tent. We're kind of getting a prediction of what is to come, right? Moses is not writing this as it is happening. He's looking back on this and he's writing this. So we're getting a little moment of Moses knowing what's going to happen, right? Moses knows they're going to the promised land. God's going to move. He's going to lead them. And so we get a little kind of future context here. So when God moves, they move, right? The pillar of cloud starts to leave the tent during the day. Israel walks. They pick up their tents and they go. And God moves during the night. The pillar of fire, God moves. And Israel moves, right? So wherever it happens, they go. Notice this. This hurts Baptist feelings, right? Verse 22. Whether it was 2 days or 1 month or a longer time. Notice this. There was no tradition. There was no repetition. God didn't say, okay, I'm going to move every Sunday. I'm going to move every Wednesday. I'm going to move every third day. God could do whatever he wanted. This showed a dependence on the people. You could imagine that every morning as you're waking up, you would peek out your tent before you even got your cup of coffee, and you would look to the center of the camp and see the pillar of cloud and say, God is still here. Or maybe that morning you got up and before you got your cup of Folgers, you looked at your tent and you saw the cloud of God and it was way off in the distance, and you would have to wake your family and say, hurry up, roll up your tents, get everything ready. We're moving, we're following God. Every single day, man, woman, child would have to look, constantly look to see if God was on the move. Do we do that today? Do we constantly look for God, where he is going, where he's moving in our lives, where he wants us to follow him? I think we can learn something from the Israelites in the book of Numbers. Where is Jesus? He's in that messianic prophecy we talked about, right? Not a broken bone, because he was the perfect Passover lamb. I hope this chapter makes sense, and tomorrow in chapter 10, we're going to start to see Israel moving off, following God, full dependence on God, leading them into the promised land. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless.